All right, well, welcome to the third event in our civics series, which is Understanding Voter ID Laws. We have a few more coming up in the next few months. April 9th, we're going to be having running an election in Sedgwick County. And then in May 7th, we'll have an abridged version of the Civic Engagement Academy. Before you leave, at the back, we do have, we have a representative from the Women Voters
League of Women Voters.
League of Women Voters, thank you. And we also have some, we have our event calendars back there, as well as some information about getting signed up to vote if you haven't already. And I'm going to go and introduce a few folks from the ACLU of Kansas. We have Leslie Butsh, who's the field director, and then also Kwan Yu Ching, who's the staff attorney for the ACLU of Kansas. And then at the very end, we'll be doing a little bit of Q&A. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to the folks over at the ACLU.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us, library folks. We're happy to be here. So we're going to talk about voter ID, but we're going to talk more broadly too about your voting rights broadly and things that anything that has any kind of current litigation pending, Kwan Yu is going to talk about, and then we'll talk about our election protection plans for this year as well. And again, I'm Leslie Butsh. I use she, hers pronouns, and I'm the field director at ACLU of Kansas.
Hi, and I'm Kwan Yu Ching, staff attorney at the ACLU of Kansas, she, her pronouns. I think we can get this show on the road, Leslie, if you want to start.
Yeah, alrighty. So we're going to talk about who is eligible to vote in Kansas, voter registration process, advanced ballots, and voting by mail. We're also going to talk about voting with a criminal history, so folks who have felonies in Kansas and the process for that. We're also going to talk about language access for voting, ADA accessibility, and what to expect at the polls. And then we're going to close out with some information that's good for you to know ahead of election season about election protection. So who can vote in Kansas? Is pretty straightforward. You have to be a United States citizen. You have to be a resident of the state of Kansas, and you have to be at least 18 years of age. But a lot of folks don't know, and we experience this when we talk to high school students. You can register to vote if you're going to be 18 on election day. So for those high school seniors that may not realize that, they may be eligible to vote in this year's election. And for out-of-state students, you can vote in Kansas. Then this goes for students or folks that might live temporarily in another residence. You can vote in Kansas as long as you don't vote in your home state. So you can only vote in one place, and you have to register by the deadline, and you have a photo ID.
Yeah, and just to jump in real quick, if you are a student from another state who goes to school in Kansas, you can establish residency and vote in Kansas if you've adopted Kansas as your place of habitation, and it's the place that you intend to return whenever you leave. And if you are a Kansan who is a student elsewhere, then you can vote in Kansas in advance by mail. So how to register? There are a couple of ways. There's the federal form and the state form. Either of them will work to get you registered to vote in the Kansas elections. I personally am a fan of the kansasvotes.org website. I've used that myself. It's super easy to do this online. I think the state form, if you are applying online through the kdoor.kansas.gov website, you will need a Kansas ID number, so your driver's license number or your state ID number. Otherwise, there will be a link to a paper form that you can fill out and mail in. And then you can also, at the DMV, apply register to vote when you are getting a new driver's license or renewing your existing driver's license. And in all of these situations, you don't need to provide any kind of proof of citizenship. We went through some litigation about that a few years ago, and that law was overturned as unconstitutional. So, updating your voter registration, all you got to do is fill out the same forms again. Again, if you do it online, it's super easy. But updating is very important. I would say that most of the issues that come up when people show up at the polls and try to vote and there's some sort of issue, it's because their registration was not updated, right? They changed their name, they got married, or needed to change the name for some other reason, or they moved and the address isn't right, so they're not at the right poll site. So once any of those critical information changes, then you should definitely update your voter registration. Put that on your list of to-dos after forwarding your mail from the post office, that kind of thing. A couple of notes real quick, which is to vote in a primary election for a particular political party, you need to be registered as a member of that party 21 days in advance of the election. So that ship has sort of sailed for the presidential preference primary that's next week. But you're still good for the primary for all the other elections in August and November. And one other note, sorry, this wasn't on the slides, but if you are helping to register other people, just be aware that there is a law that criminalizes knowingly impersonating an election official. This law is currently the subject of litigation before the Kansas Supreme Court. But as of right now, it's still in place. So if you're helping other people register, looking at you, Nancy, make it crystal clear that you're not an election official. Some people like to wear that say not an election official, just in case. So the ways to vote in Kansas, there are 3 different ways. You can vote in advance, which is our voting by mail process. There's also early voting in person. Counties often open poll sites like a couple of weeks in advance of actual election day. And then, of course, the traditional in-person on election day. In order to vote by mail, you have to submit a request to do that. You can fill out the form or do it online. And every time you request to vote by mail, that's only good for the next upcoming election. So if you want to do that, there's no permanent vote by mail option in Kansas. So you will have to do this every single time that you want to vote by mail. This is where having the proper address is key. So you can receive your ballot at the correct address, and then you can return it. You can turn it in by mail. And I think you can also drop it off usually at an election office, or there might be some drop boxes in your county as well.
And I just want to add real quick here. So there are some counties where election commissioners mail advance ballot applications to every single registered voter in the county. So I live in Wyandotte, for example, and so my election commissioner, I get a thing in the mail that tells me about the upcoming election date, and the other side of it is an advanced vote by mail application. So we are working currently doing local organizing to work with the election commissioner and try to mandate that in Sedgwick County, because it really helps remind people when the election is, and then they don't have to go find a printer and get online and find the application. It's just mailed directly to them. So that's something that we are organizing for.
I guess I jumped the gun on these slides. I'm sorry. Yes, you can hand deliver it to the polling location or Dropbox or the election office. There is a 3-day grace period for mailed ballots to be counted. It must be postmarked by election day, though. And if you miss that deadline or you forget to sign the outside envelope, and that signature doesn't match, then your vote is not going to be counted. One other note is that you can drop off ballots for other people. If you have a family member who's not able to get out, who has mobility issues, you can deliver their ballot for them in the same way that you can drop yours off. The current law is that helping more than 10 people deliver their ballots is unlawful. So if you are helping others, the limit is 10, and that is another law that is currently the subject of litigation before the Kansas Supreme Court. And you can check the status of your ballot on the Kansas Secretary of State voter review page. Let me see. And if there are any issues, contact your local county election office as soon as you can to try to figure that out.
So I'm going to talk about voting with a felony. So you may not know this, but in Kansas, you are eligible to vote if convicted of a felony once your sentence is complete. So a lot of folks don't know this. We think there's a list of over 100,000 people in Kansas who have voting rights but don't know it. And so this applies to a felony conviction. If you're convicted of a misdemeanor, it doesn't impact your voting rights at all. You can vote. If you are awaiting a trial on felony charge and you have not been convicted yet, you can still vote. And you use the same voter registration form. It includes an affidavit that you sign, which says, like, under penalty of perjury, I am saying all the things I'm saying are true, that your right to vote has been restored. So Every once in a while, folks, voter registrations are rejected. And we found that there are some county clerks and election commissioners in the state that are accessing old data. So they're not getting the most updated data about folks' sentences and their certificate of discharge from their finishing their sentence. So if this happens to anyone you know, they can contact the court of their criminal case to get the discharge paperwork. They can also contact the Election Protection Hotline always to report this up, because it's important for us to know if this is a pattern. It's also important to know that unpaid court debt has been used to keep some people on probation in Kansas. And that can extend the time you are ineligible to vote, because that sentence that I mentioned before, if you've been convicted of a felony, but you've completed your sentence, that sentence includes probation and parole. So if you're someone that has been kept on probation because of inability to pay, you should contact us if it's affecting your voting rights. But if you are officially discharged, your court debt has been sent to civil collections, you are eligible to vote. So for offender registration specifically, so this is like sex offender registry, drug offender registry, requirement to register is not part of your sentence. So even if someone has to register on the offender registry, it doesn't affect their voting rights. They're still eligible to register to vote. Voting in jail. So folks that are pre-trial and are waiting in county jails are eligible to vote, or city jails for that matter. They have not been convicted of a crime. In Johnson County specifically, at the local level, we've been organizing to win a vote from jail program, because we want to make it as accessible as possible for everyone that's in the Johnson County Detention Center to be able to vote on election day or before election day. And if you want to learn more about this project, we are going to be recruiting volunteers to help people register and informing people of their rights. You can check out more information on restoremyvoteks.org. So let's talk about language access. So if someone is of limited English proficiency, they can select a person of their choosing to accompany them into the voting booth and be their person that helps them vote, that helps like translate and interpret for them. The assistant, so whoever is chosen to assist this person, is required to fill out an affidavit of assistance form. But there are some counties that are required under federal law to provide voting materials in both English and in Spanish. So those counties right now are Finney, Ford, Grant, Seward, and Haskell counties. You might notice looking at this that the big counties in Kansas are in this group. And that's because the federal law, and it's under the Federal Voting Rights Act, Kwanya, I don't remember the actual threshold. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes, it is 5% of the citizen voting age population, which means citizens who are 18 and over. So at least 5% of that total population must speak that language.
Thank you. So 5%, so that's pretty low, right? And so in a county like Wyandotte County, there are over 50,000 people that speak a primary language other than English. In Sedgwick County, it's about 30,000 people. But because the counties are so large, they're not getting that 5% threshold. And so they're not getting those required translation under federal law. And we think the county should do more. The election commissioners have the power to expand language access. Some counties do this proactively, even though they also don't reach the federal threshold. Shawnee County, where Topeka is an example of this. So Wyandotte, Johnson, and Sedgwick are some of our state's most populous counties. Our state's most populous counties are those top three. And they also have the largest populations with limited English proficiency, but they do not provide voting materials in additional languages. So this is another thing that we're organizing around and trying to encourage election commissioners to take this next step and make sure voting is accessible to folks no matter what language they speak. So let's talk about accessibility more broadly. So all polling locations must be ADA accessible. So this includes having ramps, handrails, voting booths at wheelchair height, doorways wide enough for wheelchair access, and curbside voting. So curbside voting is required by law at all polling locations. I can unfortunately assure you that curbside voting is not really accessible at every polling location in Kansas. There are some counties that do a great job, and there are some places that don't. Ideally, And you can see this image here. You can see this little stand with the white box on it. So ideally, a voting location has a button you can pull up on your car and stick your hand out the window and press a button, and it will alert the poll workers inside to come and assist you with your ballot. And this is something that was instituted during at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, so that folks who had COVID wouldn't have to get out their car and stand in a long line if they, and put other people in harm's way. So this is a really important thing, not just for folks with mobility issues or disabilities, but for all of us who maybe are sick on election day. So this is something that every polling location should have. And then in addition to the ADA accessibility and the physical accessibility of the space, a person can also, similar to the limited English proficiency piece, a person can have someone of their choosing to accompany them into the voting booth. Oh, and now I want y'all to guess. I hope I'm going to be able to hear you. I want you to guess. I want you to name for me. And Nancy, you don't get to play this game because I know you know. How many forms of photo ID can you name to vote? To shout them out.
Driver's license.
Driver's license.
Kansas ID.
Oh, I didn't hear that. What was that one?
Kansas ID.
Kansas state ID. State ID.
Passport.
Passport.
Military ID.
Military ID. Nice.
Tribal ID.
Tribal ID. Very good.
Government work ID.
Work ID. Yep, there. 2 more. Okay, let's see. So you all got this. Driver's license or ID card issued by Kansas, another state or a tribe. I didn't hear anyone say this. A concealed carry license issued by Kansas or another state is an eligible voting ID. A passport, like you said, an employee badge issued. So this is like a federal government, employee badge, but it could also be a city, county, or state job. And then a military ID. And then finally, I don't think I heard this one either, was a student ID issued by accredited post-secondary institution. So not every college in Kansas falls under this, but the big ones do. So if you got a state ID from KU, K-State, Wichita State, you can use that to vote.
It must be unexpired though. Make sure it's not expired.
It's a really good point. The ID cannot be expired. That includes the driver's license. There's an exception if you're over the age of,
65.
Thank you, Nancy. 65, your driver's license can be expired if you're using it as a voting ID if you're over the age of 65. Oh, and a public assistance ID card. I missed that one. So there's a lot of different kinds of ID eligible to vote in Kansas. Now I'm going to pass it to Kwan Yu.
So one caveat that shockingly is also the subject of litigation is what's the status of photo ID for transgender voters? And currently there is no law that requires that your gender marker on whatever photo ID that you're using match your gender expression. So that means if a poll worker doesn't think you look like the gender marker that is on your ID, it doesn't matter. They can't prevent you from voting. And for people who are interested in getting a gender affirming ID, since we just got a ruling yesterday in state court that the Kansas Department of Revenue is not permitted to provide driver's licenses with gender affirming markers. You can get a federal ID like a passport or a passport card that will contain the appropriate gender marker, which you can use to vote. And then next, so when you're actually at the polls, you got to find the right place to go to. There's only one polling location where you're allowed to vote, and you can look that up in advance. Voting hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the counties that are on Central Standard Time. And 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the 4 counties in Western Kansas that are on Mountain Time. And if you are in line before polls close, stay in line. Do not leave. You are allowed to vote. You just can't show up after polls close and expect to vote. But if you're there and waiting, you're good. Problems at the poll. Like I said, many of these have to do often with an outdated registration issue, right? Your wrong address, a different name, you're at the wrong polling place. These are pretty easily solvable things. A poll worker can usually verify for you that you're at the correct polling place. Let's see, other issues that have come up in the past. There's no electioneering allowed within 250 feet of the poll site. Electioneering being like signs or shirts or people advocating for a certain issue one way or another. And let me see what else. If you have an issue, don't leave. Go ahead and ask for a provisional ballot. You can fill out a provisional ballot. And if there's some other issue, call the election protection hotline. That is 866-OUR-VOTE. We can often resolve a problem fairly quickly while you are still there, and then you should be allowed to vote. And if you run into a problem that is sort of resolved, contact us anyway. Let us know what happened, because we're very interested in hearing about issues that come up across the state, you know, or if it's a county-specific problem, we'd like to know more. Let's see, and speaking of which, our legal team participates in a nonpartisan election protection program. There's a national hotline for the November election that will be run locally, that we run in conjunction with volunteers from a local law firm. And usually the people working the hotlines can help with any basic questions. If there are some serious issues, they will escalate it up to us. We'll research it really quick. We'll figure it out. And we also have, as part of our election protection efforts, poll watching, which I'll let Leslie talk about.
Yes, so as part of our election protection program, the legal team staffs the phones and deals with any infringement on voting rights, but we need people like you to staff the polls and observe what's happening so we can know what's happening on election day. So we work with our friends at Loudlight to train nonpartisan poll watchers, and this is important because the Democratic and the Republican parties both have partisan poll watchers, but this is a different program. This is nonpartisan. And it's we're not able to go inside the polling location, but we sit outside with our obnoxious yellow shirts and our signs, and we have hats and all sorts of stuff to make sure folks know if they have any problems at all, they can talk to us, and we will either help them figure it out right there one-to-one, or we will escalate any problems to the hotline. This is also how we document issues at the polls. So a lot of the stuff that we talked about in this program so far, like language access, you know, IDs, even felony disenfranchisement, we heard about some of the problems that were happening on election day from our poll observers. So the poll observers is also a data collection point, and it's something that all of you just have to be 18, and then we will train you. And if you are interested, you should give your contact info to Yusef, who's there, and he can make sure you get the info about becoming an election protection poll observer. We will be training poll observers for the primary election, which is on August 6th this year, and also for the election in November, which is November 5th. And just as a snapshot, 2 years ago, in 2022, we had 135 volunteers in 20 counties at 185 different polling locations, and provided 553 hours of voter assistance. I really think we can get 300 volunteers this year. That's my goal, just to really get a snapshot of what's happening at the polls around Kansas. It's also a great way to just learn more about elections. We always encourage folks on election day, be a poll worker. And if you don't have time to be a poll worker, be a poll observer, because we can teach you about the election process, and you can be a part of protecting democracy right at the polls. So I'm just going to quickly go through the election dates that are, so if in case you didn't know, there is an election next Tuesday, a week from today. It's the presidential preference primary. So for this election, you would have had to already register with a specific party to be able to vote in that party's presidential preference primary. Also encourage you to try to say that 5 times fast, because it's a lot of alliteration. And that's Tuesday, March 18th. Your county may have early voting. I just got my card from Wyandotte. They have early voting open all this week for the presidential preference primary. Tuesday, August 6th, as I mentioned, is the primary election. June 3rd is the deadline to change party affiliation in the primary. And we have in Kansas, just to back up a second, we have what's called closed primaries, where you have to register as a specific political party to get that political party's ballot. So there are, you may remember in August 2nd of 2022, there was a constitutional amendment regarding abortion on the ballot. If you were an unaffiliated voter in that election, you would just get a ballot that literally just had one question. It was the constitutional amendment. So in the case where there are amendments on the ballot and you're not just voting for candidates, you can be unaffiliated, but if you want to vote for a specific political party's candidates, you have to register with that party ahead of the primary. On July 17th, that's 21 days before the election, is when advanced voting begins. Every county can do 21 days of early voting. Some counties do a little bit less, but they can all start at 21 days before. July 30th is the last day to apply for an advanced ballot. And August 5th, in-person advanced voting ends at noon. So that's the Monday before the election. And then general election is Tuesday, November 5th. You don't have to register with a party for this one. You could change your party and you can change it back. You can do whatever you want because you have voting rights. So whatever party you have, you'll get the same ballot in November because it's a general election. Advanced voting, these dates are wrong. So the deadline for advanced voting is always 21 days before. So it'll be like second week of October. And then it's usually like, I don't know, I think it's 17 days before the election to apply for an advanced voting ballot, but it's March, so we got some time to clean up our PowerPoint. And Juan Yu, do you have anything else to add?
Nothing from me.
All right, well, we're here to take your questions.
Go back to the previous slide and give the correct dates on the November election.
Yes.
I gotta do that math real quick then.
I know. Here, actually, I have it right here in my.
October 15th is probably correct, but the others don't. I have it right here if you would like.
We actually did this research before. This is Sarah with the library. The advanced voting begins on October 16th. And then the last day to apply for an advanced ballot is going to be October 29th. And then we have November 4th as the date that in-person advanced voting ends at noon. So.
Yep, that's correct. That's what I've got here from the Secretary of State's website. So that's the 16th, the 29th, and the 4th for those deadlines of October.
And we will have that information on our Informed Voter webpage that's on the Wichita Library website. So if you didn't write them down, you can get them from there.
I'll stop sharing and encourage you all to ask any questions you might have.
Hello, everyone. I guess I can introduce myself. My name is Yusef Presley. I am the new field organizer, working on criminal legal reform, and I'm happy to be here. Is there anything I'm missing? Is there something?
Thanks, Yusef. I would shout out Yusef is going to be working on bail reform campaign here in Sedgwick County. And he's also who you can connect with to make sure he has your contact information if you're interested in being an election protection poll observer. And he'll make sure you get on our list for that training. Thanks.
You should be able to speak and they can hear it.
Leslie, for the election protection observers, the nonpartisan, do those folks have to work the entire election day or can they work shifts?
Great question. We split it up into, I think it's three-hour shifts or right about there. So it's like so election day is always 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we have election protection shifts from 7 to 10, 10 to 1, 1 to 4, and 4 to 7. So it's 4 shifts that day. We usually have folks sign up for at least 2 at a time, but 7 to 10, 10 to 1, 1 to 4, 4 to 7 are all options for you to observe if you only have a few hours. And we also work with folks who can't fit their schedule into one of those shifts. The shifts are, just an easy way to get folks signed up. But if there's another time that works better for you, we can work around that schedule.
Any other questions for our friends at the ACLU? Okay,
Well, thanks for having us.
I'm going to let Ian give some closing remarks.
All right, everybody. Well, appreciate y'all coming. We have some flyers and handouts back here. If you want more information about signing up to vote, that is back here, as well as our event calendars for upcoming programs for the library. We also have some program evaluations back here. If you enjoyed this session and want to see more like this, go ahead and take a look at those. Yeah, thank you for coming, and again, thank you to the folks at the ACLU for doing this for us.
Yeah, anytime. Hope to see y'all out there pole observing with us this year.